and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 328, and today's date is March 31st, 2014, and the title of this episode is Russia and China Make Another Move That Threatens the Dollar. And on Saturday, I reported what China was doing. They're making all these deals. One of their latest one was with New Zealand. They're having a bilateral trade with the yuan. It will completely bypass the dollar. Russia now is setting up their economy to completely bypass the dollar. And of course, the U.S. government, the central bankers, are sitting there saying we need to invade more countries to prop up this dollar long enough for us to get some type of war started so we can cover up this entire collapse, because this collapse has to do with all the private Western central bank countries. I mean, Europe is in horrible shape. The United States is in horrible shape. Of course, we have an illusion here. They've changed all the calculations, and everyone is believing that we're in a recovery when we're really not. And now the Census Bureau is getting in trouble for fabricating data and information, and all of it's starting to really come out. But if we look at Spain right now, what we're seeing is they increased their taxes massively because they needed more revenue coming in. And as I've said in the past, all these countries who have a huge amount of debt, austerity, high unemployment, they don't have a printing press, so they need to raise taxes just to make ends meet. And right now, well, Spain missed its budget deficit, even though they raised taxes massively. They just couldn't get there. And again, we're seeing this in all the countries because what we know is the European nations are in a recession/depression. In the UK, we understand that housing is pretty much in a bubble, and we're starting to see a slowdown just like we saw here in the United States. Mortgage approvals have slowed in February by more than expected, possibly reflecting, of course, bad weather during that month. And this is what they always use. They always use the bad weather. And again, it couldn't be the economy. It couldn't be that people just can't afford it. It couldn't be anything else except for the weather. But we know better than this. We know the economies around the world are starting to fail. Now, here in the United States, what we're seeing is pretty much the same thing. But what they've done was they've completely manipulated the calculation. They changed the calculations. They give us fake data and false information, which really doesn't fit into what's actually happening in the economy. And especially all of you, and I know myself, you can actually feel that this economy does not make sense. You know people who are out of work, who are trying to get jobs. Students are coming out of college. They can't find work. The government's saying, oh, I understand you can't find work. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify your student loans, help you pay for these, and actually right now we'll defer your payments, or we'll modify it so your payments are a little bit lower, because we understand there's just no jobs out there. And we're seeing this all over the place. We understand that the real economy does not fit the illusion. But again, those people who are making a good living, who are just working every day, are not really seeing it. They're just seeing the stock market. It's going up. They hear the hype in the corporate media. They hear the president out there. They hear the Fed chairman out there all telling everyone that the economy is great. They hear the corporate media, the financial stations saying, yes, these policies are working, everything is fine. I don't see any unemployment here. I don't see bread lines. I don't see people with no work, and everyone is believing it. But everything doesn't really make sense, because what we see is massive amounts of layoffs. We see retail stores closing. We see the drop-off of people taking out mortgages. And now the Chicago PMI just missed expectations by the most in a year and tumbled to its lowest since August. The employment sub-index collapsed to 50 from 59.3. Prices paid dropped, and new orders tumbled to the lowest since August. So things are just not going well. And talking about unemployment right now, we really have to look at this. Now, teenagers from the ages of 16 to 19, less than 17% of teenagers in Los Angeles have a job. And if you really break this down, the employment rate is actually terrible across the country for teenagers. It is ranging from 35 all the way up to 43% in many different areas, because they are trying to look for jobs. And what's happening is the older population are getting these part-time jobs because their retirements are pretty much level. They don't go up with inflation, and they're seeing prices of food go up. They're seeing expenses go up, electric go up. They're seeing everything go up except their retirement. So they need to go out and get these part-time jobs, and they're taking them away from the teenagers at this time. But college graduates, everyone tells you to go out there, go to college, you come out, you get a great job. And right now we're seeing 260,000 graduates in minimum wage jobs. Now, why is that? Because there are no jobs in their major at this time, and it's getting tougher and tougher for these college graduates to find work. And this goes on to say that 260,000 people who had a college or professional degree made at or below the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour last year, according to the BLS. And I'm telling you right now, this number is probably double of what they are actually reporting. And the only jobs that were growing are low-wage jobs at this time. Some 58% of the jobs created during the recent economic recovery have been low-wage positions like retail and food prep work. And here's a real-life example. A fast food worker, Bobby, who got a bachelor's degree from University of Missouri in Kansas City, works 4 part-time low-wage jobs just to barely scrape by and pay for all his student loans, to pay for his car, to pay for everything. He needs 4 jobs because he cannot find a full-time job at this time. And he went on to say, my family told me, just get your degree and it will be fine. But as we know, it is not fine at all. Now, Fed Chairman Yellen was out there again saying, QE taper doesn't mean reduced stimulus commitment. Now, we understand that, yes, on the face of it, it looks like they're tapering. But through back channels, we understand they're sending money off to Belgium to pay for these treasury bonds that foreign nations are selling. They are picking up the slack. Also, the numbers coming out of the Fed, we don't know if they're absolutely true that they were spending $85 billion. There's reports out there saying that they were spending more than $85 billion, around $100 to $125 billion each month. And I bet you it was around $200 billion each month, and not what they were talking about. And again, what they're saying is that just because they're tapering doesn't mean they're going to reduce stimulus. Well, they're not. Actually, they're getting ready to up it even more because they're waiting for this incredible event, and this is why they're out there telling us that the economy is recovering. We're on the verge. Everyone, can you see all the jobs coming? Can you see the recovery? Look, the stock market's at all-time new highs. Gold has been pushed down, so that doesn't indicate that anything's wrong. And this is what they're trying to prove. And again, they're always out there telling you this. And they're saying that Fed takes it 2% inflation goal very seriously. Well, I'm telling you right now, inflation is much higher than that. Post-crisis labor market strengthened considerably. And again, what we are seeing is them telling us that this economy is recovering. But we have to remember, just because they tell us this doesn't mean it's actually happening, because we're seeing other indicators like the pool of 7 million people who work part-time and want full-time jobs is much larger than should be expected at a 6.7 unemployment rate. This is a sign that labor conditions are worse than unemployment rate indicates. So you see what's happening here? They count part-time as full-time jobs. So if everyone gets a part-time job in the country, oh my God, the unemployment rate is 1%, but nobody's making money. You can't afford anything. You can't support your family. It doesn't work. And again, this is part of the illusion to make everyone believe that we are in this incredible recovery, because they understand that the collapse is coming, and they can't maintain this. They can't maintain this much longer, and they realize this. Europe is falling apart. America is under an illusion. They're trying, the central bankers, U.S. government, and the European nations are trying to provoke countries to start a war. And this is what we've been seeing all across the globe. We see it in Ukraine. They made a power play in Ukraine. It didn't work out. They made a power play back in 2013 in Syria. It didn't work out. They're in Africa trying to control the situation because China is making their move in Africa, and most of the nations are now turning towards the yuan and looking away from the dollar, and they're looking to China to help with their infrastructure. So the empire of the United States is kind of losing the battle all across the globe. They realize this, they realize the collapse is coming, and they are preparing to do something and carry out something. And before they do that, they need to make sure they can control the population within the United States, because when this collapse comes, it's going to put us into darkness. Certain events are going to occur, and there is going to be rioting. There are going to be those people that are out of control, who are scared, who haven't prepped for anything, who want to overthrow the government at this point, and this is their biggest fear at this time. And this is why they've been trying to disarm. This is why they've been spying on everyone. This is why they've been making the lists. They want to know where everyone is so they can control or contain this situation the best they can. And if it means bringing people to FEMA camps and keeping them there, this is what they're going to do. And again, how do we know that they're spying on everyone? Well, a new report came out saying that RSA received about $10 million and from the NSA to make a now discredited cryptography system, the default and software used by a wide range of internet and computer security programs. The system, called Dual Elliptic Curve, was a random number generator, but it had a deliberate flaw, a backdoor for the NSA. So this over-the-counter encryption software has backdoors for the NSA. So if you go out and you get encryption software, most likely there's a backdoor, and it's really not protecting you at all. You really have to develop your own and keep the method and the key, and not commercialize it or put it out there. And again, the NSA has paid all of these companies to get backdoors into all the systems, cell phones, computers, software, websites, to make sure they have the ability to spy on every single person. And we also have to understand that DHS has been going around to all the local law enforcement and giving them, grants, funds, tanks, weapons, as long as they're in compliance with DHS. And right now, some police departments are being outfitted by the federal government. Will expose the extent of the coast-to-coast effort to obliterate local accountability of law enforcement and make those officers dependent on the on DHS. And what we're seeing right now, the funds that these local law enforcements are requesting, they're using that to purchase equipment and training that supports regional homeland security goals. Again, they have to be in compliant, and they have to do certain things to get these grants from DHS, specifically an automated license plate reading system for the police department, terrorism liaison officer training, hazardous material training and equipment, urban search and rescue training and equipment, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive training and equipment for additionally for fire departments. And also what they're doing is they also have to be in compliance for urban control and riots and keeping the population controlled. And this is why they're all being set up like this. DHS across the country has completely infiltrated all local law enforcement. They can work with them, and they have a central command, and this is why they have all the states they want all the states in compliance with the Real ID, so this way they can track everyone's movement, because the Real ID is your driver's license that they're going to fit with an RFID chip. They're also going to take a DNA, an iris scan, and a fingerprint scan, and all this is going to be uploaded to a federal database. And of course, this will be used at certain checkpoints, and you will be tracked, and they will know where you are. And what's happening in the local law enforcement, they're getting funds to spy on cell phone calls. This is part of their compliance. They're getting suitcase-sized Stingray cell towers to trick cell phones into connecting to it, and this way they can route your cell phone calls through it so they can monitor your calls and see what's going on. And all of this costs a lot of money, but DHS is providing it to local law enforcement as long as they are in compliance, because they are getting prepared for what is coming and they need to track every single person. And again, what does this have to do with terrorism? They have found nothing to do, or they haven't found any terrorism. They haven't stopped any terrorism. And if you go to the DHS site, their site for the alert system is always blank. There's no warnings or anything ever on there, because again, this is not for outside terrorism. This is for inside the country, the domestic terrorists, because they're protecting the government. This is the government's police force against the people. This is what this has been developed for, not to protect you from outside terrorists. It's to protect the government from you, the domestic terrorist. So if you don't agree with the government, DHS will come down hard on you, and this is what they have been developed for. Now, the opposition party in Turkey kind of lost the election by a slim margin. Looks like Erdogan is the president again. There were no international committee there watching the votes. Again, Erdogan is the puppet regime of the United States, and they were going to let no other type of government get in there. They're going to keep the puppet government because they need to control the country. And this goes along with all the other countries that they're controlling, like Libya, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, in South Africa, in a lot of the African nations, Thailand, Ukraine. We see the same pattern all over the place. They keep the puppet governments in place, and the same thing's happening in Turkey. Now, to provoke North Korea, it looks like South Korea and the United States were having drills, and North Korean shells have landed in South Korea waters, prompting Seoul to open fire across a disputed border zone. And again, this is all being played up, again, to provoke North Korea, because they really want them to do something. Just like in Ukraine, they would really love Russia to do something. They continually provoke. They keep beating their chest about war coming, about troops massing in size, and they're keeping this in front of everyone. And again, the only people that are talking about war are the central bankers, the United States government, the acting government in Ukraine, which is really not an elected government, so they're just put into place, and they were put into place way before the coup d'etat in the Ukraine, and we can see what is happening. They will eventually push this to the next level. When I say they're the central bankers, U.S. government, there will be a false flag event. This is being set up right now, and this will be something a lot larger, a lot more scary than 9/11, because they need to bring the entire country into the fold of what is about to happen, because they need the entire country to say, yes, let's go to war, because they just attacked us. And they could be North Korea, Syria, Russia, China, however this false flag goes. I'm going to say it's going to be a little bit easier to say it's going to be Syria or Iran, because they've been building up the propaganda. It's easier to make the story from Iran or Syria, because they've been saying Iran has been having, they're developing nuclear weapons. They've been saying this for a very long time. They're very close. They've been funding terrorists in Syria, and they can either make the story about Syria because they've been saying that, the Syrian Electronic Army has been attacking the United States. Assad has hidden chemical or biological weapons, and you can see the story would be a lot easier. Russia and China, yes, there's some cyber attack stories, but there's nothing major that would actually fit into the false flag event. Iran, Syria actually does fit. They've been using this propaganda for a very long time, and if something does happen, it would fit into their story. Now, China, as we know, is in Africa, and the the China government is helping the rebels. They're pouring in billions of dollars of U.S. money into Africa to build up their infrastructure, helping them with their natural resources, mine their natural resources. China is also already has created the clearinghouse with Kenya. Two of the nations already decided to start reducing their dollar reserves and start building up the yuan reserves. Other countries are now starting to fit in that model. And what we're seeing is the West is becoming very, very nervous in Africa right now. Major Western states with historical dominance over key African regions and markets have in the first years of the 21st century been losing influence in many areas of Africa. The Western states like the US, UK, France in particular, all have been down in Africa, and they have been ceding political and economic influence to either the People's Republic of China, Iran, or merely to an increasing unwillingness of African societies to comply with the wishes of external powers. Recent Western military political interventions in such areas as Mali, Central African Republic, Libya, Sudan, and elsewhere have not produced the strategic outcome desired by the West, implying that the Western policies have lacked the ability to adapt changing African circumstances or to the attraction of Chinese or other options. They are losing the battle down in Africa at this time. And the Western leaders are becoming very frustrated down there. This is why they want more troops. And the Chinese is spreading into Africa, and it's increasing dominance over energy and mineral resources, as well as the scant strategic infrastructure deemed vital to the West. It seems like it's unstoppable at this point. China is really pushing and making their move. A lot of the African nations are falling into place. They have a clearinghouse, and we can see China has been making deals all across the globe. So the yuan or renminbi becomes the next reserve currency of the world. And this is a huge, huge threat to the dollar. And the central bankers are not going to let this happen. They'd rather have a war start before they allow this to happen. Now, in Ukraine, we understand that Crimea right now has voted in a referendum to split apart from Ukraine. It is now joined up with Russia, and we're seeing many other areas in Ukraine wanting to do the same exact thing. They want to be separate and apart from Kiev, and demonstrators at a pro-Russian rally in central Kharkov on Sunday called for the establishment of an autonomous republic made up of southeastern Ukrainian provinces. And the Civic Forum leader urged the southeastern provinces to unite, create a coordination committee, and campaign against Kiev. We see our place in Ukraine in a historically shaped southeastern autonomy, said the Civic Forum leader. And again, they are making their move. The central bankers, U.S. government, this has not gone as planned. They're losing control of the situation at this time. Now, Crimea, Putin just said that he made a decree saying that all Crimean pensions to Russia are going to be set to Russian levels, and the first payout due on April 1st, where people are getting more money now in Crimea. The economy is prospering. They also said that Crimea is going to be a special economic zone with tax breaks to attract investors, and companies that make investment with authorities of Crimea and Sevastopol could be given tax breaks for fully fledged integration of Crimea into the Ruble zone. Russian currency has been delivered in sufficient volumes to the peninsula, and what we're seeing is Crimea now is becoming this economic mecca, and the Crimean people, their pensions are being brought up to Russian level. What we see in Kiev is Ukraine is in trouble. Energy costs are going up 200%. They have debt upon debt. They are completely broke. Welcome to Kiev. It looks like Greece at this time. Welcome to the private Western central bank model. And the people, again, they're going to start to realize that this is not good. We do not want this. And the leaders, of course, are very nervous about this. They're very nervous about the people rising up. And this is why they want the people disarmed. This is why they haven't really had the elections just yet. It looks like they're going to have elections, but they haven't done it yet. And they're making certain preparations to ensure that they have the people they want in place. And right now, of course, Kerry and Lavrov, they've been talking over the weekend about Ukraine and what they can do, and it looks like these talks went absolutely nowhere because the only agenda on for the United States, the EU, the central bankers was for Russia to get out of Crimea. That was really pretty much it. It's almost like the Geneva II talks with Syria. Their agenda was we want Assad to step down, and that didn't work. So these talks pretty much went nowhere because the central bankers, the U.S. government, they don't want peace. They understand what they need to do. They need to get a war started. They need an event to get something started. And this is what they've been doing. This is what they've been pushing for. Now, they've been playing up the threat of soldiers on the border. And, of course, the numbers coming in, they're saying there's 20,000 Russians. No, there's 80,000 Russians. No, there's 100,000 Russians. And, of course, Russia was out there and saying, listen, under the Open Sky Treaty, why don't you fly over Russia? We'll even have Ukraine come in and the U.S. drive through Russia, and you will see we do not have troop buildup. And, again, all we're seeing in the Western corporate media is Russia's ready to move into Ukraine. Russia's ready to blow up this. And again, I am not on either side. I'm an American. I want our country back from the people who took control of it. I'm not on the Russian side. I'm not on the China side. I am reporting what I am seeing and the actions from these leaders. And the action from Putin right now tells me that he's not going to go and invade Ukraine. He would have done this already. He wouldn't have had this referendum in Crimea. He would have just taken his forces, moved into Ukraine, and started the war if he really wanted a war and take over everything. Same thing in Syria. Back in 2013, he could have let the United States strike and move into Syria. He had a deal with Assad. He could have moved right in, and we could have started war. So his actions aren't really speaking, are not really showing me that this is his plan at this time. Maybe later, but right now, this is not what I'm seeing. And there was an NBC crew that went and drove 1,200 miles along the border of Ukraine, and you know what they found? They found absolutely nothing. They saw no buildup of troops. We saw no tanks or even an armored personnel carrier, and we saw nothing of the kind of what everyone was talking about. And again, what we are seeing is propaganda being built up because they need, the central bankers, U.S. government, EU, they need this war started because they realize this collapse is coming. Now, of course, when they talk about, they have Russian troops along the border, well, I hate to say this, every country has troops along their border. The United States has troops along their borders. Russia has troops along their borders. Ukraine has troops along their borders. Yes, you have troops along the borders. This doesn't mean that you're going to invade another country. I mean, our troops that are along the Canadian border, are we invading Canada? Our troops along the Mexican border, are we invading Mexico? No, we are not. These are the troops that they see, just like we saw the troops in Crimea. There were 16,000 troops. They were allowed 25,000 under the agreement. They weren't bringing in 80,000 troops into Crimea or 30,000, whatever the ridiculous number was. This was propaganda to make you believe that they were invading Crimea and taking it over. They let the people vote. They had the international community there to watch it. And guess what? The people voted to go along with Russia. Now, we understand that China and Russia are now making their move, and it's a complete threat against the dollar. And I've been saying this for quite a while, that China is slated to be the next reserve currency. I've been reporting, and I just did it on Saturday also, how they're making deals all across the globe. And right now, because of these sanctions that the United States has been putting on Russia, which is really not on Russia, which is on individuals and individual companies or banks, they decided to take the next step, along with China, along with making a direct threat to the dollar. Russia now is forced by the sanctions to create a system independent from the dollar. They're making their own payment system, so they're no longer dependent on the dollar. They're making trade with China bypassing the dollar, making trade with India bypassing the dollar, making trade with Iran, Syria, North Korea, Brazil bypassing the dollar. China, on the other hand, has been making deals with New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Brazil, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Russia, um, France, Spain, all making deals to take on the yuan or the renminbi. They're also having clearinghouses being set up, especially in Africa, and we're seeing this being pushed forward. And right now, Russia announced that it will sell products and commodities, including oil, in rubles and no longer the dollar at this point. And what else are they doing? Well, the Bank of Russia will be the first Russian bank to use exclusively the Russian ruble. A huge golden ruble symbol will be set up in the front of the bank headquarters to symbolize the ruble stability and its backing by the country's gold reserves. They have just backed the ruble with gold. This is another threat to the dollar, because what is the dollar backed up with? Nothing. The only thing right now is with the sale of oil, because every country needs to hold the dollar to purchase that oil. Now, what's going to happen, and we're seeing this in many of the countries, the United States is losing power. Libya, for instance, in Iraq, in Lebanon. And when countries start selling these oils and the people take over and they start selling the oil not using the dollar, other countries will say, you know what? I don't need to hold this anymore. I can use the ruble. I can use gold. I can use the yuan. I can use the renminbi. I can use any other currency besides the dollar. This is when we are in big trouble, and we're getting very, very close to this at this point. And again, you have to remember, the central bankers will not let this happen. They'd rather see a World War III than let this happen, them to lose control of the reserve currency. And Russia went on to say, we've been moving towards wider use of the Russian ruble as the currency of settlement for a long time. The ruble became fully convertible quite a long time ago. Russia should sell domestic products from weapons to gas and oil abroad for rubles and buy foreign goods also for rubles. So they are really making this push along with China, and it is a complete direct threat to the dollar. We are ending into the end game, and for this to go forward, what's going to happen is the central bankers are not going to allow it to go any further. They are going to bring this event to the United States. And when I say this event, I mean the false flag event, to cover up what is happening. Now, meanwhile, NATO is preparing for war. They're building up troops. NATO to promote ties with Ukraine right now. NATO will strengthen relations with Ukraine and send more troops to Eastern Europe. And again, they're doing this all over the place. They're building up troops because they understand that they are going to start this war somehow by making it look like it's another nation who's actually starting it with an event. And this is how they do it every single time. And NATO is holding more military exercises in Lithuania. NATO Air Force maneuvers with participation of warplanes of Lithuania, the United States, as well as the alliance partner Sweden, will be held in Lithuania over the next 2 days. And of course, there are senators out there saying that we should have more missiles every place. We should put them in the Czech Republic. We should start building up our missile defenses all over the place. And this is coming from Senator Kelly Ayotte. And she believes we should have missiles in the Czech Republic. But the Czech Republic says, no, we do not want this in our country at this time. Now, to make things worse, John McCain is out there telling everyone that he thinks that U.S. firms must pull out from Russia. Now, we have to really look at what's going on here. Most of their business is coming from Russia. This is how these corporations are surviving. If they close up shop and pull out, here in the United States, there would be major, major problems right off the bat. And, of course, the senator is out there saying the U.S. might need to pressure some of its biggest corporations to suspend their operations in Russia. McCain told Bloomberg Television that it would be a tough call, but that companies like ExxonMobil, Ford, General Electric, Pepsi might have to pull out or roll back their presence in Russia if President Putin doesn't withdraw troops from Ukraine. And there are no troops. There's nothing there. And again, they are building this propaganda. Of course, yes, they do have troops there, battalions of troops, because, again, every country has troops along the borders. But these are not troops that are on maneuvers, getting ready to invade. They are stationed there. They've always been there. They weren't moved into the area. And again, this is all propaganda. And Germany is very worried about these sanctions that are being put on Russia. With at least 300,000 German jobs dependent on business relations with Russia, it is hardly surprising that several top German executives have criticized the strategy of the U.S. and Europe in dealing with Russia, fearing the consequences for their businesses. And again, since Europe doesn't have raw materials, we will always be dependent on others, and it seems questionable to me whether dependence on the Middle East or Venezuela would be better than that on Russia at this time. And Germany is nervous. European is looking to get different resources from different areas because they are very dependent on Russia. And if they go forth with any type of sanctions, it will have a boomerang effect and bring down the economies of Europe, United States, Germany, and they really understand this, and this is why you don't see them putting sanctions on the actual country itself, because they understand that this would completely implode the economies of the United States and the European nations, and the people would say, you did this, you just put sanctions on Russia, and our economy is suffering, and they will not let that happen, and this is why you're not seeing them do it at this time. Now, the Ukraine government is out there saying that they want to recruit personnel from private foreign military companies in order to maintain law and order. So they want the people disarmed, and they want to bring in private mercenaries to maintain law and order. And this may suggest that Kiev regime wants to suppress civil protest and discontent. Of course they do, because if they do hold an election, they will need other paid mercenaries to be out there to control all the people, because they're not going to like what they're seeing. They're starting to. The government of Ukraine right now is not elected. They've been put into power. All the people are seeing is higher energy prices, lower wages, and the economy suffering. They're in a huge amount of debt, and now they're going to have elections. Well, we see why they're doing this. We see why they're disarming the people. We see why they want to bring in Blackstone to control the situation. And again, this is what happens in these type of situations. If you look at every country, they are controlled. There's a dictatorship. They don't want the people to have the right to vote. They want to disarm the people to keep these people, the central bankers, the friends of the central bankers, in power to keep control of the country. I mean, we see this in every single country. It's in Lebanon. It's in Libya. It's in Iraq. It's in Yemen. It's in Sudan. It is in Thailand and in Ukraine. We see this every single place. It is the same exact pattern, and this is what we are seeing. Now, Russia is making deals with Iraq right now. Russia's oil giant Lukoil has begun pumping crude oil from one of the world's largest undeveloped oil fields in southern Iraq. Now again, this oil is most likely going to be sold using the US dollar, because the puppet government of Iraq is controlled by the central bankers, United States government, and they are going to sell that oil using the US dollar. But eventually what's going to happen is the people who are fighting back are going to take over the country, just like what's happening in Libya. They have the Libyan government out of the parliament building and in a five-star hotel. They've taken and controlled most of the ports and oil fields, and eventually they will take control of the entire country. And when this happens, like I said, this is when the problems really, really start. But again, the central bankers, U.S. government, are not going to let this happen. They are going to push their agenda forward and get this event started. Now, of course, we know in Syria that the rebels are keeping the chemical weapons from being sent out of the country. They've been trying to disrupt the chain of chemical weapons leaving to make it look like Assad is stalling. And right now, Russia is out there claiming that they are seizing coastal territory. Syrian rebels are rejected a Russian claim that they are seizing coastal territory to disrupt their country's chemical disarmament. But of course we know they were. All the proof is there. They have all the evidence that they were doing this, and we know for a fact this was their whole entire scheme to make it look like Assad was stalling so they can say he wasn't keeping up with the agreement. They tried so many different tactics right now. They tried the war crimes. They tried the humanitarian route. They tried the Geneva II talks to remove him. They tried the false flag event with Turkey. And they're just trying everything to bring this war forward, to get Assad out of there, and to bring in a puppet regime. But nothing is working at this time. And right now, the U.S. House legislators are considering new terrorism-related sanctions on Iran. And they realize they can't put the sanctions on because they can't put the sanctions on Iran due to nuclear, but now they're going to use sanctions that have to do with Syria, where Iran is supplying the Syrian government with weapons and terrorist activities, and they're trying to push this sanctions through on this. And right now there's no word from the Obama administration on these new sanctions, and if these new sanctions go through, this could start the war with Iran. Because if you remember back when the president said, if you do impose sanctions on Iran, the only alternative I'll have right now is to strike Iran at this time. Now it looks like John Kerry is being implicated in this false flag event with Turkey where they were going to let a couple military personnel sneak into Syria, then fire missiles from Syria into Turkey, and it looks like Kerry's name was mentioned, and the translation, and if you go to this recording, Kerry has said to me, okay, did you make the decision to strike yet? And this was in the recording when they were talking about the false flag event. And again, this just goes to show you they are trying everything and anything to get this event off the ground, and they are not going to stop. And this brings me to the Malaysian Flight 370. And what we are seeing here is we're seeing a lot of information out there. I mean, we see this picture and it's black, and they're saying, oh, if you download it to your desktop and you look at the EXIF data, it shows the longitude and latitude. And yes, it does. But you can change that. There are tools out there, and it doesn't leave any trace. I've done it 3 times already. It does not leave any trace that you actually changed it. It reports that these are the settings. So the date, the longitude, the latitude. Again, do I believe that the plane did land on Diego Garcia? Yes, I do. Do I believe these people are being held hostage? No, I believe they're all dead at this point. I believe that this plane was going to be used and still most likely going to be used as some type of false flag event here in the United States, either carrying a nuclear payload or some other type of chemical weapon or something like that. Again, this is not just going to be the only false flag part of it. This was going to be part of a bigger, widespread false flag event, a multi-prong that had to do with cyber attacks, nuclear and biological, because they really needed to bring this home. We've already seen the planes flying into buildings, so this is not what this was going to be. This is probably going to be some type of dirty nuke or low-grade nuclear weapon probably on the plane coming into the U.S. We also see reports of the Malaysian flight where there are people on there with these semiconductors, and for some reason this is not sitting right with me right now, and I'm looking into this, and I'm sure many other people are looking into this. This story makes no sense whatsoever at this time, that there are all these people would be on the flight. They were heading to China with this technology, and now there's one person that had the technology, and that's why, and it had to do with the Rothschild, and it just seems like this is completely trying to distract everyone from the actual evidence that there is a duplicate plane sitting in Israel that could be used in this false flag event. And I believe all these pieces in the ocean and all of this is distraction to distract us of what is actually occurring. And I noticed this story all of a sudden came out when the evidence came out that there was a plane in Israel. All of a sudden we saw this come out, we saw this picture come out, and all of this, especially the picture, that could be debunked. I've done it 3 times with the XF tool, and it's very easy to do. You can't even tell that it was changed. So this evidence does not seem to hold water at this time, and this story is not sitting right with me. I do believe there is a false flag event going to occur, and we all need to be ready for this. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.